What is going on, guys? It's Bucky with Tri-Waves. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to clean a carburetor on a small outboard engine like this. This is my 1982 9.9 Johnson Seahorse motor. I got this about a year and a half ago from a buddy in a trade, and it's been a great motor. Has really ran great for me, but it's been sitting just for a little bit and having a little trouble starting it and idling. So I'm gonna go ahead and take off the carburetor today and give it a nice little cleaning. The guy I got it from did a full rebuild on this a couple years ago, and not too long after I got the trade. So I'm really just going to take off the ball. I'm going to check the jets, the ports. It doesn't take much for those to get clogged. We'll check the spark plugs. Fuel pump is somewhat recent, so we're going to give it a nice little cleaning for the carburetor. Hopefully that does it, and we'll go from there. All right, so that is a main symptom a lot of times of a dirty carburetor. It's starting, when I'm trying to idle, it's starting to die off on me. Most likely is a sign of a carburetor based on the fact that I have spark that it's starting. So no, it's not the spark plugs, the magneto's fine. So that really pinpoints everything to the carburetor. So we're gonna go ahead, take off the top here, take the carburetor out, do a little cleaning for it, spray it with some carb cleaner, check the fuel lines, put it back on, quick fix. Hopefully we're good to go. All right, so the first step is we're going to take off the 4 bolts here to take off the top of the kind of the carburetor housing, if you will. Then we're going to take off this idle adjuster, which dictates the amount of flow of fuel to the carburetor. A lot of times if that's off, that also will throw off the engine running or cutting off. So we're going to go ahead and take the 4 bolts off and get to the carburetor. Next part would be the 2 bottom bolts that hold the carburetor itself in. Next part would be these 2 bolts that will hold this housing for the idle and also the choke. That's just 2 other bolts here. Next step would be that we have the top cover off here, is pulling out the idle adjuster, and then we can then lift up this top piece of the carburetor, and that gets us straight into the carburetor. So another way to diagnose a lot of your fuel problems is, I don't know if you guys can see here, right in here is the middle of the carburetor, which would be where the fuel would be coming in at. If you spray a carburetor cleaner in there when your engine's not starting and it fires up and starts to die, that is 99.9% of the time a fuel related issue in your carburetor. I did not do that today because I know I've got spark and I do have fuel. I know it's restricted most likely in the carburetor, but again, is a very well-known trick I've done millions of times on old outboards, is keeping a can of carburetor cleaner and spraying directly in the carb. If it fires up, you know most likely it's the carburetor itself needs to be pulled out and cleaned. So now we're going to take off this little bracket that holds on the choke on top of the carburetor. Keep all my parts right here, and then I will then be able to take the choke out itself. So this model is a little different than my Evinrude. Unfortunately, I can't get to the back bolt here for the carburetor, so I'm going to take off the ignition coil that connects with the flywheel to start the engine. Take that off, and then I'm going to have to disconnect somewhat of this bracket, I think, so I can then get to that other bolt. But be careful taking this out. This is like a wound up spring, so once you take it off, it's going to unwind. I didn't want to do this, but looks like I'm going to have to. All right, we want to be very careful that that bolt does not drop. All right, the first bolt is out there. So again, these carburetors are only held on by 2 bolts. Obviously there's a lot to take off to get to it. I almost dropped that bolt. There we go. That takes off that little zip tie, and then we're going to go ahead and there you go. Carburetor's disconnected from the fuel line. All right, so the carburetor is off, and to the eye doesn't look too bad. Like I said, the carburetor was rebuilt a couple years ago, so the gaskets look pretty good. We're gonna go ahead and take off the bowl here. We're gonna actually put this fuel into a cup, glass cup, to see if there's any large amount of sediment built up. Take off some of these jets, spray it up. Inside looks pretty good. Give it a quick cleaning. Hopefully that does the trick. You see all that gas that's coming out of the carburetor now. That's coming out of the bowl now, so I'm draining it through one of the side ports here, so this would be the same thing what would come out of the bowl. Now looking at this gas, it doesn't look too bad. I don't know if you guys can see, there is a little bit of buildup and maybe small amounts of sediment, but it does not take much to clog these ports. All right, that is the last screw at the bottom of the bowl here, and the bowl looks pretty clean. That float is a little old, but really just kind of a little dirty, but I don't see where it looks too bad. So we'll go ahead and take this port off, spray it with carb cleaner, spray into the port here, the side ports. Just give it a really quick bath, and I'm hoping and thinking that will be the fix. All right, so here is the bottom of the bowl. Just give that a quick cleaning like so. Rest that there. The gaskets, as you guys can see, are fairly new, so those look good. We are going to go ahead and take off this bottom port, the main port coming out of the bowl of the carburetor. Take that out right there, and you probably cannot see it, but there's a small little hole what fuel allows to come through there, and if that is blocked, that will prevent your engine from starting and running properly. And you cannot tell, I don't know if you can see, but there is a little bit of sediment buildup in there, and that would 100% cause the engine to not start. So we're gonna give that a spray through. I'm also gonna run just a small piece of wire through that port, very carefully, of course, making sure. See, that's good. So anything that was coming through that port is now freed up, cleaned, and I think that is a very good chance what could have caused that engine to have issues. We'll go ahead and spray up into that as well. That looks good. Go ahead and spray into the side port here, which is where your fuel line will come in at. Go ahead and put that pin back in the bottom there. Put that back on very carefully. Good. Give a nice little overall spray. I'm looking in the barrel of the carburetor, and like I said, it looks really good. I'm gonna give it, of course, a little spray, and then there. Other than that, we're gonna go ahead and put it back together. I think the culprit was this bottom port coming out of the bowl. I could see it was a little clogged. We're gonna put it back together. All right, guys, so that really is the steps on cleaning a carburetor. Of course, this is not a total rebuild, but taking off the bottom bowl, looking at all your ports, making sure nothing's clogged, of course, spraying into the main barrel here. And we're gonna put it back together. I think that's the fix. This bottom port was a little clogged with sediment. If it's built up in the bottom of the bowl, that will prevent, like I said, the engine from running. We're gonna put it back together, put it back in the engine, fire it up, and hopefully that's the fix. So I unfortunately do not have a radiator clamp for my fuel line here, so I'm just gonna use a zip tie that was on there before, and then I can come back here and replace it with radiator clamp. All right, now that we got the fuel line on, we can go ahead and put the carburetor back on the two bolts here. and put these little nuts on. Like so. This part is probably, I mean, this isn't necessarily, it can be a part of cleaning a carburetor. It's not typically always necessary, but I tell you what, this is one of my, probably my favorite parts of working on these outboards is these starting cables. They're not fun. Alright, so I did not install that correctly because that should not do that. So as soon as I loosen it up, you'll see it'll pop back in there. So that means I did not install it necessarily 100% correctly. There we go. It just dropped back down into the key there. And we're going to go ahead and tighten that back. A lot of times what I've found removing these, perfect, is the first time, because they are wound up down here, it's kind of like a big I don't even know how to explain it, like a hose kind of, but see, it's got to be locked on this key. If it's not on there properly, it'll lock up and it'll stay locked. As soon as you loosen it, it'll take off the tension, it'll drop back down, and sometimes it'll actually kick itself in place, that you saw it did there. So that's tight, everything's back on. We're gonna put the top back on for the choke bracket, and then the idle top on, and then we're going to start it, fire it up, see what happens. So we're going to go ahead and put the choke back on the adjuster for the carburetor. That will feel loose at first, however, this top bracket is what actually holds the choke adjuster itself there. So you can see if I pull it, it stays in place. Go ahead and put the case back on here, like so. All right, one bolt in. This is the plastic cover that holds the carburetor, the adjuster, and kind of the choke all together. And this is the last piece to really being complete. That on, we can now put on the idle adjuster on like that. We're going to put the top cover piece on here, and then we're going to go ahead and fire it up. So everything is already hooked back up, and in the meantime I went and put fresh gas in my tank, so making sure that I'm running all fresh fuel through the fuel pump and carburetor. We're going to go ahead and hook it all up, put the water on it, see if she starts on up. All right, fresh gas. Go ahead and hook that up. Make sure that clicks. Make sure that we hear gas. I don't know if you can hear it. Gas is entering the carburetor. I can hear that because that is completely empty. All right, so we got water on now. Pumped the fuel line. I could hear fuel was coming into the carburetor. We're going to go ahead and pull the choke out and see if we're ready to go. All right, there you guys have it, how to clean a carburetor on a small outboard. Hope the video guys helped you, really kind of going by step by step. If you guys aren't already subscribed to Driveways, I'd appreciate it if you hit that button. For any other future videos, got some really cool content coming out soon. I appreciate it.